First of all, I'd just like to acknowledge that we're gathered on the land of the Cammeraygal and Borrowgeegal people and pay respect to their elders, past and present. And to say thank you for the invitation to be here, because Mosman Library has quite a reputation for using technology and also for engaging with young people, so it was great to have a chance to come along and talk with you. I'm part of the Public Library Services team based at the State Library, and that means that I work with all 374 libraries around New South Wales, and one of the areas I look at is children's and youth services, but also the social media space and what libraries are doing with it and how they can help families, parents who come in and ask for advice, kids who come into the library and use these tools, and try and help the staff to be really skilled in helping those families, but also helping people to understand the risks as well. So we're going to have a look at risks and some of the rewards as well tonight. I guess anyone would acknowledge that in the last 20 years a lot has changed, and I guess this little video really shows how much has changed, how quickly for all of us. So just thought we'd have a look at that. I just think that's really interesting because that is only, whoops, now it wants to play it again, because it is only 20 years. It isn't a long time, and I think what we're actually seeing now is that change is happening even faster, and the kids that we're talking about, the teenagers, have already, in just their lifespan, so much has already changed. Things are going to keep on changing, and I think the rate of change is the real challenge. So when you're talking about social media, you're talking about things like GeoCities that started in 1994 and are already gone. Okay, 2009 it closed down, it's gone. We're talking about things like Facebook that really only got going in 2006. We're not talking about technologies that have been around for years, and that's I think one of the real challenges for parents and families is, how do you keep on top of things that keep changing really, really quickly, and that kids are going to adapt to and start using before their parents even understand the risks that they might be dealing with. So I think that's one of the big challenges for parents. What I've done with this presentation is I've really drawn on the work of 3 different organisations and individuals. Dana Boyd, who is a researcher based in the US, and she's just recently been out in Australia. She looks particularly at that whole space around social media, youth practices, this idea of what's public and what's private, because a lot of parents really worry about, what their kids are putting out there on things like Facebook, what they're writing down. She's got quite a bit of research available on her website, as well as being available, as you can see, on Twitter. The second one is the Young and Well Cooperative Research Centre, which is based down in Melbourne. And this is a group of people who have been funded to look at the research around how social media can contribute to health and wellness for young people, and what's happening in that space, and what risks and rewards there are to be investigated. And I've also drawn on some work from YAPA, who are the youth organisation here in New South Wales, because we've done quite a bit of work with them at the State Library over the last couple of years, and they've helped us out quite a bit. Dr. Phil Nunn in particular wrote some work for us around what was happening with youth and with brain development and behavioural stuff, so that librarians could understand it, and some of it's going to be useful for us tonight as well. So what I thought we'd have a look at is teenagers, real world and virtual world, and is there really a difference? Is there a clear line? For those of us that are adults, of course there is, and we actually are able to say, well, you know, this is my online self and this is my offline self, and maybe we don't even have much of an online self. But for teenagers, I don't think it's quite that clear cut. We're going to have a look at the social networking tools that we're talking about at the moment, and with always that warning that there's new ones coming all the time. We're also going to have a look at what a savvy digital citizen needs to know, and what someone who's a parent is going to need to know so that they can help them out and know the right questions to ask and the right conversations to have. And I've also got a few links for where you can get help if you need some more resources. So I thought we would just start by remembering what it was like to be a teenager, which, you know, no one ever wants to go back in that space, so it's always a bit hard. But imagine yourself back, age 15. Can you remember some of your friends? Were you part of a group or were you a bit of a loner? Do you remember the interactions between your peers? Was there any name calling? Perhaps a little bit of character assassination in the playground? Were there bullies in your classes at high school? Was there writing on toilet doors that might not be very friendly? Did you or some of your friends engage in any risky behaviour that you wouldn't want your parents to know about? Were you much more worried about what your friends would think of you than what your parents thought about anything you did? And, you know, not much has changed. Teenagers are still the same, but what they have now is this extra layer of communication and interaction online available to them. Okay, so adolescents are really a mystery to many adults, I think, especially their parents. And it's a puzzling phenomenon when you consider that we've all been teenagers. You'd think we would remember what that was like, but I think sometimes it's so painful you just get past it, you don't want to remember. It's a time, of course, of great change, and three things are happening. The ability to reproduce, the establishment of an identity, and the formal commencement of logical, rational, reasoned thought. Now, I like to stress the formal commencement because it's not all there and it's not all happening, and that's part of the trouble when we're dealing with social media spaces, because they're great for establishing your identity, they're great for communicating with people, but if you're not doing it, you know, if you're driving a fast car with no brakes, it's not really going to work terribly well for you. So the research tells us that teenagers don't differentiate between their online social interactions and their real life interactions. They're in communication with everybody. It doesn't make any difference. They're not drawing any artificial lines. It's all just part of one continuum. And that social networking relationships can actually be very positive ones, especially for kids who are trying to sort out their own identity, trying to work out where they fit in the world. Maybe they don't have a lot of friends at school, or maybe their friends are, a little bit further away and they can't get to see them very easily, or maybe they're struggling just with their sense of who they are and where they fit in the world. They can often find friends online that they may not find in the real world. And 90% of the 16 to 29-year-olds are using the internet daily. Now that's Australian research from 2010, so 90% of them, almost every kid. They spend an average of 22 hours a week online, which is more than any other age group. And there's 97% of them that own a mobile phone, and about 64% of those phones are internet capable, which means that they're carrying around their connection with them all the time. They can be always on in the social media spaces. It's easy, it's constant via the mobile phones, and of course, if you're always on, it's really difficult to escape if you're being bullied, for example, because it's there, you're taking it home with you. If you were, back when we were at school, if you were being bullied, you left school for the day, you went home and it was over, and you didn't have to face it till you got back to school the next day. But these days, if someone's being bullied online, that can carry on 24/7. Can follow them home. If they've got a computer in their bedroom, it can follow them into their bedroom. So that is one of the real challenges for young people to deal with in this space. And of course, there's all that brain development stuff going on as well. And as we know, teenagers' brains are developing from the back to the front, which is really good because at the back, that's all of the emotions and feelings and that sort of thing, but it's not the rational thought, which is a bit of a problem because they're acting and reacting and responding without the capacity necessarily to stop and think about it and plan and make better decisions. So that, I think, is something that can cause a real problem when young people are using these sort of tools and making choices that suddenly are visible, published out there on the net, and they don't realise until they calm down that maybe that wasn't the smartest thing that they could have done. So this, of course, making those wise judgments and choosing to be a kind and caring and considerate person is something that happens later, which is a bit sad, really. And could explain things like planking, which, you know, adolescent brains are this work in progress, and some of the things that they're having difficulty with, and I know some of you know this stuff, is self-control. So there's those increases in risk-taking, impulsive sensation things, in sensation-seeking behaviour, which can manifest itself in things like filming fights in the playground and putting them up on YouTube or on Facebook, taking planking photographs and putting them up on Flickr. And I do know of some libraries in New South Wales that were surprised to find planking photos in their libraries. You know, kids had come in and taken these photos up, hanging between shelves and things, and put them up on Flickr. So short-sightedness, often that failure to think ahead and seeking immediate gratification, which can turn into posting a photo that seemed funny at the time on Facebook and tagging all your friends, and suddenly it's out there, everyone can see it, but not just everyone who's beyond there, because if you tag a photograph and I'm your friend, I'll see it, but if it turns up on my wall, everyone else that's my friend that might not be your friend is also going to see that photograph. So they may not think about that at all. They're also very susceptible to influence at this stage of their lives, and of course they're at risk of peer pressure, and there's an awful lot of pressure to accept people's friending requests on Facebook, for example. Very hard to ignore them if, you know, all your friends are putting pressure on you. Well, why didn't you friend me? Why aren't you, you know, part of this group? Or why, you know, you might find yourself unfriended or excluded from a group. Equally, it can be a bit of a problem as well. You may have heard people use the phrase digital natives, which is this idea that somehow young people, because they're growing up with technology all around them, automatically know how to use it. And that's not quite the case. They're not scared to have a go at using it. They don't fear that they're going to break it. So they'll try it and they'll fiddle around with it and figure out how to use it, but it doesn't mean that they're actually automatically knowing how to use it safely. And that's where they actually still need guidance and help from parents and adults in their lives to help them. Even educators are finding that when students go to university, they're really comfortable with technology, they can do lots of wonderful things with it, but they don't necessarily know how to use it the way they need to use it when they're learning in an educational setting. So I think that probably we could extrapolate that out to social media as well. One of the things I think that parents and adults really worry about quite a lot is privacy. And there's a sort of, I guess, an astonishment that young people would want to share so much of their lives out in public. And when I was putting this talk together, I was contacting people that had teenagers and contacting anyone I could think of who I thought would have an opinion about this, to get a bit of a sense of, you know, how people would react. And my mum, who has a Facebook page but chooses not to put her own photo on her Facebook page, said to me, well, you know, it's just like hanging your washing out in the main street. And I thought, well, you know, from her point of view, she's a very private person. There's no way she would put this stuff out there. And she's probably a bit horrified about the things her daughters write on her wall from time to time as well. But the work that Dana Boyd, that researcher from the US, has been doing has really looked at how young people feel about this idea of privacy, and they still care very much about their privacy. And I saw something really stupid on Facebook on the way over here tonight, and I thought, oh, I could show you. That would be a great example. It's a young guy I know who's lost his mobile phone. And so he's put up on Facebook, I've lost my mobile phone, I've lost all your numbers, here's my new number, just send me your text, you know. So I thought, you know, if you're going to steal someone's identity, you know, you've got his name, you've got his date of birth, you've got all this information, now he's given you his mobile phone number as well, and he hasn't given us his bank account details. So, of course, I can't show you that, because we've got to respect his privacy, even if we don't respect his intelligence particularly this evening. And I think that that's something that Dana's work really draws out, that young people still feel violated if their the adults in their life get onto their Facebook page. And I've heard people talking about young people starting to migrate off Facebook onto Twitter because they think it's more private, because maybe there's too many parents and things that are friending them, and talk about peer pressure to be your friend on Facebook. If mum wants to be your friend, what are you going to do? Do you say yes? Do you say no? So there is a tremendous amount of social pressure there, and a lot of the teenagers are sort of saying, well, with Twitter you can choose to follow someone or not to be followed by someone much more easily, and then people can't really do that much about it. Can't put you under that kind of pressure. But Dana's work also reveals that sometimes teenagers feel like the place where they have the least privacy is at home. Like you and I would think that perhaps the most private place we have in our lives is our home, where we can do what we like, dress how we like, behave the way we want to. But teenagers don't feel that way because they feel like, well, mum can come into my room, she can look at my stuff, or dad can look over my shoulder while I'm watching something on the internet, or I'm talking to my friends and that kind of thing. So in her research, over and over, this idea that they feel like they've actually got more privacy online than they do sometimes in their personal lives is a bit of a tension. And what they don't seem to have is the power to protect their privacy. They don't seem to have what she calls agency to actually control that and manage it. So this is a quote from Dana and Alice Marwick's work, where they said that teens are really more visible, but they're actually in the process, this growing process of developing the skills of how to manage that privacy. And when I read that, I thought, this is really like learning to drive. You've got to learn the theory, but then at some point you've got to be out on the road, and you are going to make some mistakes, but you've got to be on the road to learn to drive. It doesn't work any other way. And I think it's probably the same when we're talking about social networking. They've actually got to be in that space. They've got to make a few mistakes to find out about what the consequences are. And I think the last part of this quote is really important, because the world that these young people are growing up in, and the world they're going to be working in, socialising in, living in, is going to be a networked world. So the skills they're learning, the etiquette, if you like, what the risks and the rewards are, is something that they actually need to know, both for their work and their social lives going forward. So we've talked a lot about teenagers, and I thought you were thinking I was going to talk about social networking, so we better get onto it. So when we're talking about social networking, I have in my mind a big long list of websites, but I'd like to know what you're thinking about when I say social networking. What websites, what tools are you thinking of? Anybody?
Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter.
Yeah, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter.
I mean, my little girl is just preteen. She uses Skype a lot.
Yes.
Skype.
Yeah, Skype is really interesting.
It is, because I think she thinks it's not traceable, but I think it is traceable. Is it or not? I don't know.
Not only traceable, people can actually record a Skype conversation or interview. So, and I know it's really quite popular with a lot of the young girls. They like to have a chat to their friends and that kind of thing, because they can see each other and that sort of thing. And because you can record a session, if there's a falling out with a friend, they could also probably edit a session and use it in some way that she might not like. But that's about being smart, I guess, about not saying things on Skype that you wouldn't be willing to say in front of the classroom at school, or mum in the kitchen, or that sort of thing.
I mean, I've told my girl all those things so many times, but she still does silly mistakes. Yeah. She makes silly mistakes when she's emailing or Skyping.
Yeah.
I don't know how you stop that. I mean, I know they obviously have to develop these skills that you're talking about, but it's so aggravating.
It is. And you're already on the front foot because you're having those conversations, which is where it all starts.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same as the other conversations you have about choosing your friends wisely and, making good choices when you go out with your friends, and you don't do stupid things and that kind of stuff. It's just all part of growing up in this century, I think. There's quite a lot of these sort of sites, anything basically that you can interact with. If you can tag something, if you can comment on it, if you can share it and send it on to somebody through a network, anywhere where you can publish your own content. So that might be your own blogs and things like that. A lot of young people are getting into Tumblr and using that as a blogging tool, or something like Pinterest, which is the latest thing where everybody's collecting all their websites into a visual kind of pinboard. and then you can have followers, you can follow other people, you can share your pins and this kind of thing. I have heard people say that tends to be more popular with the girls than the boys, but whereas Google Plus is more popular with boys. So if you believe in a gender bias, there seems to be a little bit of one there.
What is Tumblr?
Tumblr, it's just another blogging platform. So it's a little bit like WordPress or Blogger. Someone might use it if they wanted to keep perhaps a diary online. Amazingly, my sister did this, I won't say which sister, and she kept her diary online, wrote all sorts of amazing things about the family through, and then got very, very upset when one of us stumbled upon it. And because it was private, you know, it was out there, we weren't supposed to see it. It was all right for anyone else on the planet, but we weren't supposed to see it. And that's that amazing tension of privacy and what is public in these spaces.
Bands are using Tumblr these days as a very strong focus of their promotion.
Yeah, I think it's an easy platform if you want to use, if you want to put video clips and other files.
Really nice as well. So.
Yeah, so very popular one, that one. Okay, so there's quite a range of social networking tools, and I would hesitate to give you a definitive list because something will be turned off in a week or two and something new will come along and suddenly be popular. And it's a bit like fashion because the young people, I think, are going to start moving away from Facebook. I think that's just automatically going to happen because it's so popular with so many adults that suddenly it's not really a very cool space to hang out in if you're a teenager anymore. They're going to go looking for something else. And I'm amazed to see things like MySpace having a bit of a resurgence in popularity. I never would have thought that teenagers would be interested in Twitter because it's, you know, so limited, you know, 140 characters. It's just like sending a text message, but maybe that's what they like. It's a bit retro, a bit different. Maybe in code you can send messages that people can't understand. Scary, isn't it?
Terrible.
You know, are you on Twitter? Have you already missed that particular bus?
I was quite cutting edge.
Oh, you know, it's been around more than 5 years, which is, you know, getting pretty long in the tooth in social media terms. Yeah. Okay, so what about the risks? What are the kinds of things that we're worrying about in this space, aside from being out of fashion? I think the first one people always think about is online bullying. That's always the first thing that kind of comes to mind. But when I was doing the research for this presentation, I found this amazing article about how willing young people are to share their passwords. And that's got, I think, really quite serious ramifications if they don't understand that sharing a password is basically giving away your identity and that someone can pretend to be you. The other thing that really surprised me when I was doing the research was the power of some of the location services. So some of the smartphones where you turn the location services on and suddenly the phone knows where you are, and so your photos come up with location and your tweets, and you may be using Foursquare and marking, you know, here I am at this restaurant or whatever. And I think that's also a risk that young people probably don't even imagine is going to impact on their lives. So the cyberbullying, let's quickly talk about cyberbullying. Dana Boyd's research again looks at this area because she was interested in this idea of privacy and public and that sort of thing. And she feels very strongly that cyberbullying is so apparent only because it's written down, because it's recorded online, it's discoverable, and that verbal in-person bullying is probably much greater, and it's just not visible to parents. You don't see it because it's happening at the bus stop, or it's happening on the way to school, or it's happening in the playground, or you know, in some other way. So she really feels that cyberbullying is just, you know, one part of a bigger picture. And unfortunately, you know, it is a reality, and I mentioned earlier this idea that if you've got your phone with you all the time, it's always on. It's always there. So if you are experiencing some bullying, then unless you're smart enough to say to your parents, you know, I'm being hassled, and your parents are smart enough to say, well, give me the phone and take it away and, you know, give you some time out, because you know what it's like, the phone keeps chirping away in your bag, or you've got it in your bedroom, things like that. It just can target you anywhere you happen to be. So that is a problem. And of course cyberbullying has such a large audience. Instead of it just being the small circle of people around the bus stop who might hear whatever's been said, it's everyone who sees it out there on some social media space.
Can't you block people?
Yes, We can block people, and that's one of the strategies to teach kids to use. Absolutely. I think there's probably a number of strategies actually, and we'll get to those in a sec. There's a whole lot of different things that can happen with bullying. There's a whole range of awful things that human beings do to one another, and it seems like they can do almost all of them in the online spaces with multimedia help. Things like flaming, where people just start out fights and insult and threaten one another. That can happen. Or the obvious ones of harassing someone, sending them messages over and over and that kind of thing, or saying terrible things about someone online. This idea of impersonating someone, I mean, our public figures have that happen all the time. I saw a tweet just yesterday where someone has gone and impersonated Julia Gillard and set up a LinkedIn account for her and situated her in Adelaide, and she's got no connections and no friends. And I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's also awful because someone's just pretended to be her and created this account. So, and young people can do that as well. Outing people's secrets, sharing embarrassing stories and things they wouldn't want out there, tricking people into revealing secrets or information online, excluding someone from a group or stalking them, repeated harassment, sexting, which is a particularly nasty one where kids are sending one another or threatening one another and making them send photographs that are partially nude or demeaning through cyberspace, and of course those photos end up who knows where. Bullying by proxy, which is really quite peculiar, where they convince someone else to send a message, some other person to put something awful up on someone's page or send them some kind of threatening message. Polling, so voting on what you do or don't like about somebody. I'm sure you remember this from high school, when everyone said, oh, what do you think about this person, and that kind of thing. Only now they can do it with polling tools online. Gossiping about people, taking embarrassing photos and putting them up, that kind of thing. This particular image is one that just shows you how a mobile phone can be used for something negative, where they're filming a fight and that's going to end up probably a photograph on someone's Facebook page or a video on YouTube, or worse, a video on YouTube that gets picked up on a current affair later on. And I think it is easy to focus on the negative because that's what we see and that's what we hear about in the media quite a lot, because they're stories and they can catch people's attention. But it can also be used for really good purposes, so there's lots of good opportunities for people to use these tools, and it's about teaching kids the difference and teaching them how to be really smart about it. One of the things that shocked the heck out of me was about all the different kinds of motivations that there can be for cyberbullying, and it made me realise that maybe your biggest fear is not that your child's going to be a victim of cyberbullying, but that without realising it they might actually be a perpetrator. Because some of these things they just sound like kids I went to high school with. The vengeful angels, they might be angry at something that's been done and feel like the revenge they're taking is warranted. They might feel like they're protecting another friend who's been bullied or something. Generally, this person would be doing it on their own, not necessarily working with other people, but feel like they're, getting in there and rescuing somebody else. The revenge of the nerds one, which is someone wanting to exert some authority or show that they're actually powerful enough to control other people, perhaps with fear. And these kind of people want an audience, so they're going to do it in a way that other people are going to see. They're going to brag about their actions and want a reaction and maybe escalate their activities if they get one. The inadvertent cyberbully, I think that's probably the saddest of all, because they don't think they're a bully. They don't realise that they might be pretending to be really tough online. They might be making really, smart comments back to people, or playing a role, or they might actually be reacting to some negative stuff that's been happening to them. They might just respond without thinking through the consequences of their actions. They might say something that you could say, back to your brother really quickly and ha-ha, it'll be funny, but when you put it out there, it might not be funny in cyberspace. They might be doing it just because they can for the fun of it, or joking around with their friends and it gets a bit out of hand. And they tend to do it when they're alone and are mostly surprised then when someone accuses them of being a cyberbully. They just didn't realise that their behaviour could be interpreted that way. And then I'm sure I remember that some mean girls, they're bored, they're looking for entertainment. Unfortunately, they are typically female, and they mostly bully other girls, not necessarily boys, and they require an audience. So they might even be doing it at a sleepover, and we'll be gathered around the computer and putting stuff up, or sending messages and being quite competitive about it, sending something worse than the other one. They want other people to know who they are and crave attention. So yeah, some pretty horrible stuff going on out there. It's happening in the playground as well, it's just more visible when it's online. So what do you do? What do you teach a kid to do in this situation? If they're targeted by a cyberbully, then the first thing is to stop, to not do anything. Calm down, save the evidence, and don't respond. One of the people who sent me a story to include tonight had a son who was 16 who actually got suspended from school because there was an exchange back and forth over Facebook. There was stuff that was not they shouldn't have been speaking to each other that way, but the person who complained deleted what they'd said and just brought in a printout of what he'd said. So it looked like all of this stuff had been an attack and not a response to things that had been said to him. So save any evidence if there is an incident of bullying, and don't respond. Just cut it dead, because it doesn't work if they don't get a response. Block, which is the one you mentioned. Block them or limit all communications just to those that are on a list of trusted friends and buddies. And tell. That's the most important thing. Get kids comfortable about telling someone, either a parent or another trusted adult in their life. Make sure they understand that this is one of those times it's like stranger danger. They just come and tell you about it and you deal with it together. Don't let them feel like they've got to deal with it on their own, because otherwise it gets worse and the bullies get more powerful. Now, I mentioned to you the risk of exchanging passwords, and I had no idea that it was relatively common for couples, like young teenage couples, to exchange their passwords as some sort of form of trust and romantic exchange. And apparently it is, and even with your close friends you might share your passwords. And then of course if that relationship falls apart, then somebody's got password privileges and can put stuff up on the page while they're angry. They mightn't have done it when they had time to calm down, but while they're angry and they can play havoc with your account, they can change your settings, they can change your password so you can't get back into your own account, all that sort of stuff. So one of the other things is to make sure that there's passwords on smartphones, because if you leave your smartphone lying around and you don't have a password on it, the first person who picks it up can get straight into your Facebook account or your Twitter account or your bank account if you've got it in that way as well. And never give out passwords to anyone. And this advice said to accept parents, but I think there might even be times when you wouldn't give your password to your parents either, depending on the kind of relationship that you might be having. Now, I also mentioned the one about the apps that actually leak your exact location, and a lot of them do it. They ask you for it once, and you set it up and you say, oh yes, you can have my location, but then it just keeps on using it. So things like Facebook, so you can check in. The first time you check in somewhere, if you don't then go and turn the location service off, it's still operating and it's still indicating where you are. Flickr, Foursquare, Twitter, all of those ones. And if it's tied in some way to your identity, then there's just a whole lot of information about young people out there for someone who might be looking for it. So the best advice is to tell them to just turn the location services off. I even have heard about an extreme situation of a young girl who was having problems with Facebook and felt like the safest way she could use it was to actually disable her account. When she'd go on, she'd use it, and then she'd disable it. It's hard to cancel an account, but it's easy to disable it, and then you just go in and reactivate it again the next day when you want to use it again. And that was her way of controlling her little world. I'm not sure it's the most practical way, but it was working for her. Have some kind of policy in your family about location services. Make it a bit of a guideline that they can control it, they can turn it off, and that's the way we do it around here. It's not all negative. There are quite a few rewards around social media and social networking for young people. The research from the Youth and Wellness group down in Melbourne is finding really positive things around mental health, around identity, around friendships. And of course there's those essential skills that they're picking up and learning for life in the workplace and life generally, social interaction and that kind of thing. And I do think that that analogy I used earlier of it's very much like being on the road. It's about knowing how to drive your car safely, and you just got to be on the road to learn it. Can't do it any other way. So we're in the business of raising savvy digital citizens, people who can operate in this world, who know how to keep themselves safe, and basically it's being smart and strong and kind, I think, in this space, in the same way that real life is like that, they're the things you're trying to achieve. So savvy digital citizens don't share private information. They understand that that's theirs to keep private. They check their security settings regularly. When I was putting this presentation together, I thought maybe I could go into Facebook and I could show you where all the security settings are and that kind of thing, except that it changes about every 3 to 6 months. So whatever I show you will be out of date very quickly. So the best rule of thumb is actually to check those safety settings, security settings regularly, and just be sure that you know who's seeing what you're putting out there. I got caught myself. I thought that things I was putting up on my wall were only being seen by friends, but there was a change, and I just happened one day to discover that some things were showing up on a mobile version that weren't showing up on my computer that people could see. So don't assume that the mobile version's working in the same way as the computer version, just check both. Stop, block and tell. So when they encounter bullies online, that's what they do, keep the evidence, and just make sure that they know that's just how to respond. And they can tell their friends that as well. And the younger you start telling kids to do that, the better. Savvy digital citizens don't share their passwords. They turn off their location services, and they watch out for phishing links, because of course social media means that there's so many links, so many tweets, so many messages, so much stuff going around all the time. And if you get a link sent to you, you need to know to check, do I click on that link, or does that look like maybe I don't know that person? And maybe someone's just scamming me and sending me a link and they're going to get in and do something to my computer. So kids need to know to be a bit smart about what links they click on. And they also need to be, I believe, tougher than the trolls, because trolls are going to put horrible things, flaming messages, nasty things up on their website, and on their Facebook page, on various other social media spaces, and they need to be tougher than that and not respond. They need to block those people and just not engage, because if they get sucked into it, then there's always a risk that this pattern can go back and forth and they can come off the worse for it. So they need to know to be tough. And savvy digital parents who suddenly have to catch up with what's going on need to be able to explain to their kids that nothing's really private. If you're putting it out there on a website, it isn't really private. Even if you're using a Gmail account, that's not really private. If you don't believe me, then have a look at how targeted the advertising is. They know exactly how old you are and exactly what you're doing. Teach kids to keep that personal information private. Teach them how to use their privacy settings, or better still, sit down with them and say, what are the privacy settings on this? Can you show me how this works? And let them explore it with you and set it up the way that they will be safest. Remind them to protect their friends' privacy as well. They might be really good at looking after themselves, and they might be tagging their friends in photos and all sorts of things that are revealing more about their friends and where their friends are than perhaps is really wise. So get them to think about their friends as well. Have some hard and fast rules about posting, about what it's okay to post. The suggestion was no nude or semi-nude photos would be a good place to start. No videos like that. Not online or via mobile phone. And maybe no pictures of doing drugs, drinking, or anything else like that that's going to be a problem later on when you're looking for a job or trying to portray yourself as a model citizen. Remind kids that the golden rule applies, that what goes around comes around. If they spread rumours, if they put up mean comments and that kind of thing, they are going to come back to haunt them in some way or another. And help them to think long term, because everything they're doing is leaving some kind of digital footprint. I don't personally believe that this stuff is going to be around to haunt us until we're in our old age, because I don't think people are going to pay for the service to store it all. But I do know, for example, that the Library of Congress is keeping every tweet. So there are going to be some archives, there are going to be some records that will hang around for a long time. So help kids to think long term, help them to think that what they make and create online isn't going to go away, and if they don't want it to be there in the future, if they don't want to see it tomorrow, they better not put it up there today. And then where can you get more help? What other resources are out there if you need them? I've only listed 4 here. There are quite a lot more things out there. ACMA have got some really good resources on their CyberSmart website, and they've got them arranged by ages. So depending on the age group of the kids that you might be talking to, there's stuff for teenagers, there's stuff for younger kids as well. And one of the things they've got there for teenagers is a video called Tagged. And it's this idea that what you do online is going to maybe tag you for life, and it's got some discussion questions and things like that. So there might be a place in your life where you can use that with a group of teenagers. The Elena and Madeline Foundation is really interesting because they take a lot of interest in cyberbullying in particular and bullying in general in the community. So they've got some good resources up on the website as well. And Law Stuff have got some good information around cyber safety, because kids don't always realise that the stuff they're putting up there is actually in the real world, and that the same laws about libel and slander and all those sorts of things still apply, and that stealing someone's identity or pretending to be someone else is probably actually going to get them into grown-up kind of trouble, not just kid trouble. So, okay, I will make these links available, so if anyone's having trouble seeing them like that, we can do that.
Thanks very much, Mylee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.